the public can access this meeting via WebEx technology. The the meeting number is 2331-069-2674, and the meeting password is Tuesday with a capital T. This meeting, we will hear public comments in person and virtually. Meetings are also being broadcast live on Burlington Cable Access TV, BCAT, and the video and audio recordings are being made. This meeting of the Burlington School Committee is being held in person at the School Committee room in the Burlington Public Schools Central Office. Members of the public are welcome to attend this in-person meeting. Welcome. Please note that while an option for remote attendance and/or participation is being provided as a courtesy to the public, the meeting will not be suspended or terminated if technological problems interrupt the virtual broadcast unless otherwise required by law. Members of the public with particular interest in any specific item on the agenda should make plans for in-person versus virtual attendance accordingly. If you are participating remotely, please identify yourself by typing your name on the screen in advance and verbally once you are identified to speak. We request you turn on your camera. Comments and statements are limited to 3 minutes. And I will now read the equity statement for the Burlington Public Schools. Educational equity means that every child belongs and receives whatever support they need to develop their full academic, emotional, and social potential to learn and thrive every day. And now we'll rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you all. Now we will, I would accept a motion to approve the warrant. Okay, why don't you put your mic on?
So moved.
Okay. Okay. All those, and everything has to be roll call tonight. For people who are watching on BCAT, it may not be visible, but Mr. Brooks and Ms. Massardo are here virtually. So in favor of approving the warrant, Ms. Monaco?
Aye.
Ms. Massardo?
Aye.
Mr. Brooks?
Aye.
The chair votes aye, and that's 4-0-0. And now, is there anyone here for public participation? Okay, no one in here. Is there anyone with their hand up online? Okay. Next, we have Mr. Shannon here, our student representative, to give us a student report. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me. So hi, everyone. Pretty quick update this week. First and foremost, the Italian exchange students who were just in northern Italy for 10 days arrived back safely 2 days ago. I know that their exchange trip was amazing, and they are really grateful for the opportunity to go. They made so many good memories. Like, all my friends were like crying on their way back because they had such a good time. The athletic boosters are currently running a fundraiser with Burlington High School varsity athletics. So at every game, they have like a little donation bin where people can donate like non-perishable food and like basic necessities. So if you go to a Burlington High School sponsored event, that will be outside. And speaking of games, this Friday, Burlington Girls Volleyball is hosting their Spike Out Cancer fundraiser. All the proceeds will go to the American Cancer Society. There'll be shirts, there will be raffle baskets, and it's a really nice time. I know last year we had a big turnout, so we're hoping for one similar, and that's all I have in store for today. Thank you.
All right. And senior year's going okay?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
All right, good. Dr. Conti, anything else before we move on? I can't see you, so.
No, Madam Chair.
Okay.
Matt covered everything.
All right. Actually, if I could add the food drive, so it's for the Burlington Food Pantry, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so they're collecting, I think I saw something that said 1,000 pounds or 1,000
Yeah.
items they're looking to collect. So.
Yeah. Big goals, but I think we can reach it.
All right, excellent, thank you. All right. Okay, so thanks for coming. Are there any subcommittee reports tonight? You're separate. Nope. Okay. No school committee subcommittee reports. Is there a Ways and Means Committee report tonight?
There
Mr.
will be.
Moore.
Excuse me. There will be one during the school building discussion, but there's none at this time.
Great. Thank you for coming, also, and Mr. Byler. And then other announcements. Does anyone else have an announcement? Mr. Brooks, any announcements? No. Ms. Massardo? No. I guess I wanted to, Dr. Chen, I'm going to ask for your help with this. I know tonight there's a meeting at Francis Wyman for as an overview. You want to explain about that meeting in case somebody decides they'd rather go to that and then watch us?
Well, it's from 6 to 7, and I just came from there. And what it
okay.
is
Oh, it's over. Okay.
what it was is that Chrissy Conceition gave an overview about what our SEL curriculum is, and we've had that curriculum here for many years already, and what Wayfinder is all about. And from the parents, from when attending it, the parents felt it was very informative, and she gave a great presentation about what's going on, some examples of SEL practices that we even practiced at the beginning of our warm-up. And it was just a nice way to introduce what the Cassell model is, which is a recognized model for the social emotional learning curriculum that we have here under Wayfinder. And so, yeah, and I saw the principals also there as well, too.
Great. Okay. And the other announcement, I know you finally have a date for the literacy night, so if you could make that announcement as well, I'd appreciate it.
Yes, our literacy night, and when we come up to the report
Okay.
of instruction, I will also go over a little bit about
Okay.
what we talked about. But the literacy night, just so that you know, is going to be held from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. It's going to be at the Francis Wyman Auditorium. What it is
And the
Everson
date
is November 6th on
Thank you.
Monday,
Okay.
from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. at Francis Wyman Auditorium. And we will be talking about the elementary reading program, and also providing parents with, or caregivers with, opportunities as to how best to continue the reading instruction while they are at home, and what our reading instruction is all about, pre-K through 5.
Thank you. Dr. Conti, do you have any announcements tonight?
No, ma'am.
Okay. So, seeing no others, we can move on to our learning, equity, and thriving. Dr. Conti?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So first on the agenda is a request for out-of-state travel for Mrs. Christine Conceition to attend the National Center for School Mental Health Annual Conference. Again, I'm requesting out-of-state travel for Mrs. Conceition to attend the conference I just mentioned in New Orleans. The dates for the National Center for School Mental Health Conference are December 5th through 7th. So requested time from the district will be 4 through 8. Ms. Conceition has been selected to be a presenter at this conference and will be also be attending session. The conference focuses on implementing a comprehensive school mental health system and building social emotional supports for students and or communities. The anticipated cost is roughly $1,200 and will be covered by the Curriculum and Instruction Office. Again, I recommend that the committee approve out-of-state travel for Ms. Conceition to the National School for Mental Health Annual Conference.
So moved.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? Okay, from Ms. Massardo. Any discussion? Seeing none. Ms. Monaco?
Aye.
Ms. Massardo? Aye. Mr. Brooks? Aye. chair votes yes, and that's 400. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Moving on, we have another out-of-state travel request. This is for Ms. Carrie Fortunato, our elementary math coach, and Mr. Michael Fryman, our middle school math teacher and math coordinator. So I'm requesting permission for out-of-state travel for Ms. Fortunato and Mr. Fryman to attend the 55th NCSM Annual Conference. The NCSM conference will be October 28th through 31st. The program focuses on high quality and equitable math instruction and learning for all. The anticipated cost is roughly $5,000 and will be covered by the Curriculum and Instruction Office. Again, these conferences are planned and budgeted for well in advance. It's recommended that the committee vote to approve this request for out-of-state travel for Ms. Carrie Fortunato and Mr. Michael Fryman to attend the 55th NCSM Annual Conference.
So moved.
Can we have a second from Mr. Brooks? Any discussion? Seeing none. Ms. Monaco?
Aye.
Ms. Massardo? Aye. Mr. Brooks? Aye. Chair votes aye. That's 400. Thank you.
Again, thank you, Madam Chair. Moving on, if that's okay.
Yes.
I want to hand it over to Dr. Chen, who will give us an update.
Yes, thank you very much. First of all, I want to say congratulations to Christine Concession in Burlington, in which they were recently awarded the SEL Mental and Health Grant in the amount of $40,950. So congratulations to Burlington and also to Christine Concession's hard work on the social, emotional, and behavioral health needs of students, families, and educators. The second thing that I want to talk about is there was recently an article in the Boston Globe, and it stated that we use the FMP curriculum. And I want to say, after doing much research on this, we have never used the FMP curriculum for 20 years or more here. Now, we do have FMP books, but again, we do not use the Fontes and Pinella curriculum. The other thing that I want to talk and just to clarify is that we have a blended literacy diet here. It is not a balanced literacy diet. It is a blended literacy diet, which is research-based best practices. We spent last year $25,000 on decodable books and $0 when it came to trade books. What decodables do is they help our students prepare how to read by making awareness to phonics, sight words, and fluency, whereas trade books and level texts help our students with vocabulary, comprehension, and fluency. And so if trade books are ever used, and we have a series of trade books, they are again used for the objective of vocabulary, comprehension, and fluency. They are not used to teach students how to do phonics, sight words, or fluency. That occurs with decodable, and thus we have what is called a blended literacy diet. In addition to that, we also, since 15 years, we have used not only that, we've also used Foundations for Phonemics and Fluency. And Foundations is through it's the classroom way of doing Orton, Ham, and Gillingham, which is research-based best practices. And 3 years ago, we used Haggerty for phonemic awareness. And so we have never used the FMP curriculum for 20 years. And in fact, I just want to showcase that these are examples of decodable books. And what decodable books do is they teach students how to sound out words. So like how to blend words, your consonants. This is how you learn how to read. And then we have also trade books, but we have many different companies that we use. We use Flyleaf, we use Rigsby, we use Scholastic, and we use FMP. But we do not use the FMP curriculum. So these are just books, and sometimes we also have books in which for students just like to pick out. And you know, these books have nicer pictures in them. They have a nice little story to them because it's about reading comprehension. Whereas if you were to pick up a decodable book, again, there is a story to them, but however, you're doing reading practices and your consonants and your sounds and your vowel sounds. This is how we teach students how to read. So if I'm correct, also Dr. Conti, we weren't the only district in which was misquoted, correct, about using the wrong curriculum. So I don't know why that happened, but I just want to reassure the parents that we do not use an FMP curriculum.
Thank you for that explanation. I know a lot of people were very concerned about what the Globe reported, and it wasn't accurate in that
No, it was not
aspect.
accurate.
So thank you for that
It was not
update.
accurate at all. And then the other thing I wanted to share with you is that as part of the process that we're going through a curriculum review, and we're taking a look at math, a true curriculum review, if done properly, and I've talked to my other colleagues, it's about a 3 to 4 year process, but along the way you are addressing questions. And so, we have recently met with Dr. Kateri Thunder, and I worked with her when I was in Louisa. She did a lot of work for us, but before that I had our administrative team and Eric Conti reach out to her so that we could know what she could bring to us, right? She is a research person who sat on NCTM. She was part of their researchers. She has written many books. She's a practitioner, and she works with visible learning. So she works with John Hattie, Korn Publishing, and that group. And so she's very renowned for her work, and she is also someone that you can talk to. So teachers can talk to her, and she's not all theoretical, but she's also a practical based. And so what we're looking at for this year is we're looking at a true curriculum review and data analysis, looking at it from an equity lens to ensure that all students have access to high quality curriculum. And we're going to be exploring mathematics course pathways, including Algebra 1 in the middle school. And as we continue to do that, there is going to be a report that's put out, and these pathways will allow us to see what areas of curriculum and professional development then we need to do. And then in year 2, we're actually going to begin the process of building up the curriculum revision and initial implementation. We're taking it back to the old school of understanding by design. I want to make sure that our power standards are all hooked up. I want to make sure there's a nice transition between elementary to middle school to high school. I want to make sure that we're also putting in their University Design of Learning, UDL, which is Carol Ann Lynn Tomlinson's work. I want to make sure if there are evidence-based instructional strategies in Tier 1, because Tier 1 is where 80% of our students receive the curriculum. And just because you're in Tier 2 and Tier 3 doesn't mean that you still do not receive Tier 1 instruction. So the focus is always having a robust Tier 1 instruction that is high achieving and engaging for all learners and teaching at very high levels. And then we're going to do a lot of walkthroughs, a lot of demonstrations. We're going to get clarity and discourse. We're going to begin a train the trainer model so that we can begin the summer curriculum work and take a look at all of our common assessments across the board. We're also going to have in there built matrices so that we can continue to monitor our progress, that we're making sure that what the pathways we have put in allows folks and allows students to enter at multiple times and to exit, and to ensure that they have access to pathways that they may not have access to right now. And then stage 3 is to continue to build up the professional learning communities. Once we have that curriculum up and running, to have data walls, to have also to take a look at building the teacher leader capacity. And then also from there, we're going to also build in and put in the MTSS model. We're really going to put it in and make sure it's robust all the way from pre-K through 12. And we're going to look at everything that's evidence-based instructional strategies for Tier 2 and Tier 3. And so meanwhile, what we've also done is that I've written for curriculum review work, and I put it out there, and it's been posted for about 7 days now. It will be posted for about 7 days. I'm looking for teachers to help me in this particular curriculum review so I can get the voices and representation. And I've also asked for L teachers to also apply, and also special education teachers. And I'm starting to get a lot of teachers both in special education and L. So this is very exciting where we're headed. And it's going to also have a focus on the equity lens. So it goes in conjunction very nicely with the equity report that's going to be forthcoming for all of us.
Thank you. That's great to hear all the work that you're doing and the teachers are doing. I would love it if you referenced UDL a little bit, and I think it's going to be referenced later. So I was wondering if you could give us a 3-sentence or a 1-paragraph, because we're going to start using the term UDL, I think, a lot more, and maybe for people who aren't as familiar. Could you just is that something you want to?
In a nutshell, what it means is, I guess the easiest way for me to describe it would be that it allows all students to receive access, right? And you look at different teaching strategies that allow students to receive access so they can have more student voice and more student choice. And you meet them at where they are. But before you can do that, you have to have a very sound and robust curriculum. You can do 2 at the same time, but you have to start out with identifying what are your power standards. What is the end goal that we want all of our students to experience from their math experience at the end when they graduate? What does that look like from the end, and then you work backwards to build that curriculum, and you make sure that your transition points are very strong.
Great. And Dr. Conti? Yeah.
Madam Chair, I think of UDL visually, and so if you were building an entrance to your house that was above grade, I think they always have this visual where if you think of that as sort of a teacher designing curriculum, if the teacher designs a ramp, that doesn't preclude people who are capable of going upstairs to get into the house, but it also allows people who can't use stairs to get into the house. So if the objective, the standard, is getting into the house, a ramp would be a more universal design. So I think that's sort of the forethought that we're asking teachers to think about, is not that the endpoint is any different or the standards are any different, as Dr. Chen was saying, but that the teaching methods to getting there allow more students to have access all at the same time.
Yes, thank you. And I would like to add also that reinforce that it's about having instruction start where everybody can access it. And maybe even starting by putting the house not above grade. If the house is level on the ground, then everybody can access it also. And I think this is something that will allow all of our students, with all of their different learning profiles and all of their different backgrounds, to access the same curriculum. And that's, I think, our goal, is to make that an excellent curriculum that's accessible to everyone. So I do think I know I'm going to be raising UDL in the future, and I know you folks are. So I wanted to just give a little brief, hear that brief explanation. So thank you. Is there anyone else who wanted to comment on that? No. Okay.
I do want to
Yeah.
say also too that one of the reasons why we're spending such a really, we're going to really take a deep dive into the math curriculum review is because we hope to emulate this process for other subject areas as well too. And so it would be too much to do 2 curriculums at the same time, because there's so much work involved in just doing one curriculum, especially if you're doing it, looking at it vertically and horizontally pre-K through 12. And that's what I'm going to be tasking this particular group doing. We're going to be working once a month with these teachers and administrators and with Kateri Thunder at starting to look at doing a deep dive into the curriculum professional development we have now, and taking a hard look at our pathways and all of our data.
Yes. Thank you. It's really good to hear about this work that you and the staff are doing. Thank you. So, Dr. Conti, are we done with that item, Dr. Chen? Okay, thank you. Dr. Conti?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I know we've been talking about it for a long time, but the district received the equity report, I think it was last week, towards the end of the week. And so I wanted to, I have already shared it with the committee in your packets, but that means tonight it becomes a public document. So I just wanted to acknowledge that we received the report, and we'll be making it available publicly and sharing it. The report was, I think, shared with principals Friday or this afternoon. I forget exactly when I sent it. Again, it will be posted on the website after this evening, so anyone who is interested can have access to the document. We've started to go through the report with the help of Dr. Chris Taylor from William James University. So Dr. Taylor is meeting with us bi-weekly to go through the report. It is very dense, and it's going to take us a while to get through. It's broken into sections, and each section has recommendations. So I think it's also providing us a roadmap in terms of how to move forward. We're talking about putting together an opportunity to have a public conversation about the document. The form of that and the scheduling of that we have yet to finalize, but we'd like to give anyone who wants to come in to have a conversation. And again, my initial thinking is to separate that from a school committee business meeting, because it may take someone more than 3 minutes to express themselves if it's not in the agenda, and we want just the opportunity to have that conversation be, again, facilitated by someone who can do this work well, and so we can do that. In working with Dr. Taylor, going through the report, again, I have not forgotten all of our prior conversations. We're working on a job description for a DEI support position that aligns with the findings of the report, and I think would make the job much more manageable and sustainable and successful. When we have that job description done, we'll certainly take it before the school committee, and then our intention would be to post that as soon as possible. Do I have the exact date when that position is going to be posted? I do not, but that is the direction, and I really would like to get that posted as soon as possible, again, but have it be aligned with the reports and the findings that we've had. So I also want to, again, as Dr. Chen has already done, connect the equity audit, which is more of an overall report of the district, with the very targeted work that she's doing with the math curriculum. And I think the targeted work that she's doing in math has its foundation in the equity audit that you all have and that you'll be reading. So some of those questions are, again, who has access to math curriculum when, what are the outcomes for different groups of students, how are we addressing the needs of all learners through our curriculum, and I think answering those questions in math, that's going to help us answer the questions sort of across the board with all of our subject areas. So as you all have and have read, there's a cultural and racial aspect to the equity audit, but there's also a language portion and also a student learning style, neurodiverse section of this report as well. It is not something that we can say if we do these 4 things next week, we are going to be an equitable organization. That's not how this works, but I think it's a starting point. I think many of the things you're going to recognize already. I think it would be confirming. I think some of the work that we've done already you'll see is aligned with some of the recommendations already, and it's just going to be an ongoing conversation. But it was something that we have been asked to complete for a while, so I want to make sure we get the completed report out there. And so I was, again, pleased to have it done, and the amount of work that we have ahead is significant, but I'm looking forward to continuing to make progress in this area.
Did you want to make a comment at this point, Dr. Chen?
I just want to confirm again what Dr. Conti has said, that the report itself will talk about who has access, right? You bring up the point about UDL, right? Universal Design for Learning. So, education and what we teach our students, right? And allowing them to have many, many access points, and then the matrices to continue to monitor that progress is just going to ensure that all students, right, wherever they are, receive the best education possible and have access to the curriculum. For instance, if they decide they want to take Algebra 1 and they want to take Calculus. So I think that the work in the equity report should be included, and it should be a lens that we're using always in curriculum instruction and an assessment. And so I think it goes hand in hand, the recommendations that are in the report of what we need to do much better for all students.
Thank you. So I'd like to see if any other members would like to comment on the report. We've had the report for a few days, but it's a big report. It's not something that we're going to have a long conversation on, but I wanted everyone to have a chance to comment if they wanted to tonight. No. No? Okay. I had a couple comments. Surprise, surprise. Again, I didn't digest it all. I read through it once, so that's not enough to digest it, but a couple things stuck out. One is the UDL idea that by increasing the way our teachers teach with a UDL, where instruction starts from access for all students, that is a piece that will help include and bring an excellent education for all of our students. Another thing that I noticed that I have spoken with various people in the district numerous times, and for people who don't know, as I was a teacher, every school district I worked in was not doing this very well. So DCAP is a district accommodations, and I forget the exact curriculum accommodations plan. And it means that even when students do not have a specific learning disability or an IEP, that there are certain kinds of curriculum accommodations that all students should be entitled to. So for example, a student may not have a learning disability, but if they had additional time on an assignment or a test, they might not get anxious, and so therefore they would be able to perform better and not be so anxious, remember what they learned. That's just one example of an assessment accommodation. We have a DCAP in Burlington. As in all the other districts I taught in, I don't believe it's being followed very well, and the report didn't think it was being followed very well. So that's the kind of thing that I think is very concrete, that I'm looking forward to working on with everybody together, that I think can make a really big difference in terms of access to the curriculum for all of our students. There's also was a number of issues around how there were recommendations like training something called courageous conversations for difficult conversations that are hard to have around issues that come up in our community and in our schools regarding racial differences, cultural differences, language differences, special education, learning style differences, and how do we help our teachers? Because many of our teachers are doing a really good job, and most of our teachers really want to do a really good job, but it's not easy. And so I look forward to, as we go through, looking for strategies that we can help our teachers with to be able to discuss difficult issues or to provide the culturally proficient resources that they need. Teachers need these resources. They need support. It's something that's really hard to do on your own. And I look forward to having that be a real focus in the district. And then finally, there's a number of different workshops and trainings that were recommended, and one of which is for the school committee to have a training. And I think there's a variety of ways we can go with that. I don't have one particular suggestion. I know Dr. Taylor is going to be consulting with you, so I look forward to having something that the school committee can work together with, some kind of a workshop, so that we can help promote this work and help make our school district, the best it can be for every single one of our children. So, thank you. Any other comments about the equity audit for tonight? Dr. Cummings.
Again, Madam Chair, will be posted probably tomorrow, and it'll be made available. And I think it's I'm not going to say a starting point, because we've already been at a starting point, but I do think it's a confirming report, and is going to help us to make more sustainable progress moving forward. So I'm excited to, again, have it completed and to share it with the community.
Great. Thank you. Okay, so next item, Dr. Conti.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We have two second readings. We have Section J and Section I. We withheld one of the policies from Section J, which was the age of entry policy, JEB. Given that we have, again, two members here and wanting to get the complete J section done, I think what we had discussed is keeping the Burlington language, not going to a hard stop date that MASC had, but shortening the Burlington language to 1 month and not 2 months. So it would be, I think, August 31st or September 1st would be the sort of date recommended by regulation. And then what we would continue to do is for children born between September 1st and September 30th, we would allow the parents to write to the district to ask that we do sort of a relatively simple and somewhat unscientific assessment and to make our recommendation in terms of the student accessing first grade. So that's kind of what we had decided. I think I'd like to spend more time on this policy in the future, but again, in order to get it done, I think Mrs. Monaco mentioned something about it being a little bit warmer, I think, and not as harsh seeming as a single cutoff date. So if we could just shorten that to 30 days, I think that would be helpful to the staff up here.
That's the way I understood it as well. Mrs. Monaco, did you?
Yeah, I wanted to point out, which I said to Eric a little while ago, passing policies takes 4 votes. It's a supermajority.
Okay.
So there are 4 of us here. If we all agree, we can pass this.
Okay.
If we don't, we can't.
Okay. Good reminder. Thank
But
you.
I will make the motion that we approve the policy as Dr. Conti just described it, which is the cutoff date is September 1st, but he can make exceptions for children born during the month of September based on what?
The language is written there. We do a basic reading, a basic math, and a sort of a socialization sort of thing. But I'd hate to tell anyone that it's not a scientific process. We just work with the parents and make a recommendation.
I
So
just want the motion to be correct.
the motion to be correct would be we're going to take the existing Burlington JEB policy and shorten it from 60 days to essentially 1 month, ending on September 30th.
Okay, so moved.
Okay. Do we have a second? Okay. Is there any discussion about this? I certainly, I do support this version. Mr. Brooks, any comment? No? Okay. Anything else? Okay. So seeing none. Ms. Monaco?
Aye.
Ms. Massardo?
Aye.
Mr. Brooks?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye, so that's 4-0-0, and we have our 4 votes that we need. Thank you. Okay. Dr. Conti.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this is a second reading for Section I, and I did get some feedback, and I'd also like to ask the committee to make again, pull another policy out because I want to spend more time with it. So I'll discuss that first. So if the committee chooses to approve Section I, I'd like that approval to be without approval of IJNDD, which is the social media policy, and reviewing Franklin's policy that Mr. Brooks recommended, and looking at some other districts. I think it makes sense for me to have some conversations with the BEA, with the Teachers Association, and work with teachers on the social media policy and to make sure we have agreement. I think in a very brief conversation I had with Sean Musselman, he thought clarity around social media policy would actually be helpful. So I just want to make sure we do it correctly, and I don't want to put policy language in place and then have it cause more issues down the road. I do think given the environment in which we're working and the discussions around freedom of speech that keep coming up. We need to just have a more in-depth conversation about social media policy. And so if we approve, again, Section I, I'd like it to be without the approval of I, J, and D, D, and I will get more language to the school committee that we can have a discussion about the social media policy, and would love to get approval or at least some collaboration from the BEA on that policy ahead of that. There are a couple other questions with this, and there was also I think there was an incomplete sentence that we will complete when we have the final draft. And I did share Section I with Jose D'Souza and Dennis Villano, and they seemed, again, they did not give any feedback, and they seemed comfortable with the technology changes. Obviously, if things come up, then we will address them as needed. There was a question I received about homeschooling, and we allow access to activities now, and we do allow for after-school activities, and I think the principals have supported that, and sometimes it depends on the actual activity and whether there's a more sort of subtle where if a child has attended Shawsheen, which is not a homeschooling experience but another accredited school, and they don't have an activity, we have not allowed that child to come back and participate in an activity here at Burlington High School. Usually Shawsheen would have an arrangement with, say, Billerica High School for that activity, and so when the child chooses to attend the Shawsheen Vocational Technical School, then the activities with that school come with it. It would be similar to a student attending Burlington High School but playing a sport at a different high school. So it just but homeschooling is a different situation, and we have allowed homeschool students to participate in after-school activities. So that was, again, policy IHBG. So that was a question, and ID was again recommended not needed. So I was going to delete that. So Ms. Simon, you had asked me whether we needed that or not, and the recommendation was that we did not need that.
Okay.
We are keeping the 185 days. That makes sense for the calendar. That builds in 5 snow days. And there was again a language suggestion about merging 2 sentences in IJNBD, which says laptops will be replaced every 5 years based on availability of funding and subject to change. And again, that was a grammatical suggestion that we would change that, so we will change that in the final copy. And I think that was all of the suggestions that we had for I. So again, I'm requesting the school committee approve Section I on a second reading. We will make the grammatical changes I just mentioned. We will eliminate ID as recommended in my notes. And I'm just asking that you approve this on a second reading without policy IJNDD, the social media policy that I need to spend more time with.
So moved.
Okay. Is there any further discussion? Ms. Monaco.
I looked at the policy that was submitted from Franklin, and I thought there was some really good things in it. It also seemed like really detailed, and I don't know if we can do all of that, but I think it's a great idea to work with the BEA on that. I understand, now I could have this wrong, but what I'm told is that some of the kindergarten teachers communicate with parents using maybe Instagram. I'm not sure, but and that's fine. I have no problem with that. But some of what I read in there was, for instance, on social media, that teachers shouldn't be friends with students in their class, like on Facebook and stuff. So I think you ought to talk to the BEA about that, because some of it sounds like it's worthwhile to make some changes.
Through the chair, Ms. Monaco, I sort of agree, but it would be a language that hadn't existed before, so I want to make sure we
Right.
have those conversations. I also think we're really trying to promote communication through Parents Square, because some of the other platforms don't provide translations. And that was one of the, again, the comments in both the equity audit and the, we're sort of responding to a class action lawsuit in regards to the accessibility of our website and web information. So one of the reasons we moved to Parent Square, the primary reason we moved to Parent Square, is a teacher can communicate in English, and the software automatically translates that message into the home language of the parent. Then the parent can respond in their preferred language, and that gets translated back into English. So Instagram, as far as I know, doesn't do that, and so that's what we're really trying to. We're trying to channel people through Parent Square.
Yes, Ms. Monaco?
So the policy that we held from the last meeting, we've taken care of.
Yes.
But what do you think, what kind of timeline are you looking at for this, this one? I think it could take a lot longer.
It might take longer, but I think we should try to spend some time on it. And I think it's a great topic for the Joint Labor Management Committee, and we can make that a topic of the conversation. And it's really about, it's not assuming ill intent. It's just about protecting employees from social media or from policies that they can sort of be addressed on. I think it does discuss. There's a clear difference between private conversation and public conversation, and I think it makes that distinction. And no one's trying to limit speech, but as a public servant in a public school setting, I think we just need to talk about some of the guardrails that should exist when we're using social media. And it's challenging. We also have many Burlington families connected to the schools. They could be neighbors. They could have grown up with children who they're communicating with, and we just have to talk about how to make that distinction. Again, it's not from any preconceived idea that people are doing things incorrectly. It's honestly just about, again, establishing some guardrails that'll protect people moving forward.
I certainly don't think there's any ill intent at all. I think that the staff might welcome this policy because it gives them the ability to tell other people what they can and can't do.
Did you want to?
No,
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yes, so
Yeah.
we're all set.
So,
I made
okay,
the motion.
you made the motion with seconds. Is any other further discussion on this? Okay, I do have one other thing, which is, you said that Mr. D'Souza and Mr. Villano were comfortable with the policies regarding, there's a number, in this section, there's a number of IT policies and user policies and iPad policies and things, and I found it incredibly confusing. So I'm happy to vote in favor of this tonight, but I think I still would like for someone who knows more about it than me to go through that set of policies within Section I and say, this really belongs in the handbook, or these two could be merged or something. I'd really like it to be worked on, and I'm not the right person to work on it. So can you go ahead, can you
Yes.
pursue that, Dr. Conti? Yes. Okay, thank you. And Ms. Massardo, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I just had a question. I think we updated the library policy. I think it was the IJL. We just updated that. Was that in the spring? There's no date on it in here. Are we going with the one that we just added?
Yes, that was an updated policy that we needed, so that's going to be inserted here.
Okay.
Mr. Valano made sure that that was included.
Okay.
So we will get a date on it, Ms. Massardo?
No big deal. I just want to make sure it was the same one.
Mr. Brooks?
Sure.
Can I just pick back on Monica's point? I know we can't pin down a date today, but, can we get an update in, say, like 90 days? Just so we can kind of monitor progress so it doesn't fall off the radar.
Absolutely, Mr. Brooks. We'll keep everyone informed.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right. Any further discussion? So to vote on the motion, Ms. Monaco,
Aye.
Ms. Massardo,
Aye.
Mr. Brooks,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye. That's 400. All right. So we got a second reading in for section J and for section I with one policy to be reviewed within 90 days, at least an update back to us. Thank you. Okay, the next item, Dr. Conti, is the section K.
Again, this is a first reading. You all should have received a copy of the policies and my notes. Not looking for any vote tonight, but if you have questions, I've received some questions from some members, but if you have specific questions, please send me an email and I'll incorporate those questions prior to the second reading that's coming up, and we will try to get the policies approved. These are the last two sections, K and L, and then Ms. Presser from the MASC will put it all together and have a complete policy manual posted, and that'll be posted electronically for all the public to have access to. We will discuss sort of how to access that at a future committee meeting if we get through our second readings. And then the nice thing about our contract with MASC moving forward is they will maintain the policy manual moving forward. So there will be an updated, publicly accessible policy manual moving forward, and then the committee can discuss how to go back and sort of fine-tune any policies that the committee would like to revisit on an ongoing basis. But at least I think you'll be starting those conversations from a complete manual. So again, I went on a little long. This is just for section K. Please review and provide me any feedback.
Does anyone have any comments tonight on section K? I did want to comment so that when people go through it, to consider on section KCD, when the committee members look at that, there are actually two versions of these. I'm not quite sure why. I liked the first version better. I'm not sure this in the merged document, not the one with changes. It appeared to me that there were two documents, two policies called KCD that were very similar, but I'd like people to take a look because I would prefer the first one. And also on section KF is about outside groups using school facilities. And the number 8 one is described in a way, I know that it's sort of the last, we use school activities first, and then we have youth groups and recreation department, and we have a set of priorities that I think I agree with. But the last one refers to groups that are not connected to the schools and not even necessarily part of Burlington. So the incident, the example that comes to mind is that the Greater Boston Indian Americans group does rent the high school some years, the auditorium, the cafeteria, and provide a festival for India Day. And the way it was worded, I wasn't sure. I think it was saying that the school committee would have to approve outside groups. So for something like that, I don't feel we need to make an approval, but other people may feel differently. Maybe we could modify it to be the first year, it would need school committee approval with a new group, but if it's a group that we've already approved, we could have them be able to continue to review, do it yearly, that kind of thing. So I just wanted to highlight those as things for people to look at and think about what what your preferences are. And finally, on KI, number 3 says that we would request people to do, and I'm forgetting what the topic was, visitors to the
Visitors.
school, right? It says they would be requested to sign in the office, and I would like that to say required. So just, those are things to think about as we go through looking at it for the second reading.
And
Dr.
again,
Conti?
Madam Chair, one last thing is the KLG, which is the Relations with Police Authorities. We have an MOU that we work on with them every year anyway, so, and it seemed to be a philosophical statement anyway, not an operational policy, so my recommendation, some of these were school committee discretion. My recommendation is that we go with our local MOU and not the MASC conversation. But you all can look at that again. If you have questions, please send me an email.
Okay. Ms. Monaco?
I understand your point about number 8, about the organizations, but I think we should keep it the way it is because things change. And over the years that I've been involved, I know that some of the organizations that have come in, the use of the buildings has changed, and all kinds of things happen, and school committees change. So, you know, if it's an organization like you mentioned, they're going to get the approval easily. But I would prefer to keep it the way it is.
Okay. Ms. Massardo?
I was just trying to ask which policy I found it. And then I agree with you on the recommended to sign in. That was a red flag to me too. I assume we have other procedures about visitors, but definitely should be required.
Any further comments on section K? Okay, Dr. Conti. Moving on to section L, which is the last section.
And in comments from Dorothy Presser, there's not a whole lot of notes because there's no current section L in the Burlington Policy Manual. So what you're looking at is sort of an added-on MASC section. I think it's relatively new, so you can have no section L if you want, or you can add the section L from MASC if you want. So we saved one of the easier ones for last.
Does anyone have any comments tonight about section L? Okay. I did want to comment that for section L, for policy LB was relations with other schools and school districts. It did say we needed to specify, so I think that the lab program is the main one that we do. So for the next time, Dr. Conti, if you could, if we choose to use it, what are the specific schools or educational districts that we would include? For LBC, it's relations with non-public schools, and in the time I've been on the school committee, there was only one time when a private school wanted to open up in Burlington, and we had to review their procedures and such. So I think this could be helpful, so if people look through that, understanding it is the legal responsibility of the local school committee to approve or not approve private schools that want to open in our town. And so it always seemed a little strange to me, but given that that's our responsibility, I would like to look at that carefully and decide if we do want to have a policy in place. And I do like the idea of LDA, I do like having student-teacher being encouraged with, you know, the support if our teachers are interested. So I'd like to consider that one as well. Ms. Monaco?
I'm just confused on the, on LB. Why do you think we need to specify?
On the bottom of our draft, it says, I think it's probably there, it says that this is usually written with specific examples for each district. We could decide not to, but that was I think that's the recommendation of Ms. Presser, is that what it says here? I'm looking.
It's
okay.
sort of, yeah.
Yeah. So just wanted to alert people to that and think about it. And if we're going to use that one, which I'm not sure I feel that much that we need, to what are the schools and districts that we would be doing that with? Ms. Monaco?
Well, I guess my concern is, this seems like a very generic, get along with everybody. And so if you list the ones you work with, if something else comes up, you'd have to change the policy to include them.
Right. And so maybe we
Nobody
don't
will
want
think of it, and so that won't happen.
so maybe we don't need the policy because we do like to make nice with other districts, so.
Okay.
Anyway, but yeah, something to think about for the next time, okay? All right, seeing no further discussion on section L, Dr. Conti, we shall move on.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, Ways and Means has been very patient, so we're joined by Mr. Moran and Mr. Eiler. This is the Fox Hill School Building Committee. Again, it is a standing agenda item, and there a Ways and Means presentation regarding some financing options. So with that, I will certainly turn it over to Mr. Eiler and Mr. Moran, and you have all of the stuff with Bob worked out for the presentation? I hope so. All right.
You have the presentation there, Bob?
I do. Do you want me to put it up first, or do you want to speak first?
Why don't you put up the title slide, and I'll get going. Thank you, Madam Chair. So Ways and Means Subcommittee has been meeting with the town administration to go over various financing options and where the implications of the various large projects that we have coming up. The school committee has asked us to give a little briefing on that, so that's what we're doing here today. So this is, just so we're clear, this is not a presentation that Ways and Means has voted on. It's one that I've put together, it's based upon all those meetings that we've had with various people. It has been vetted by a variety of people, so I think it should be fairly consistent with what you're hearing from everyone else, hopefully. So next slide. If we take a look, so a quick history lesson here. To put it all in context, if we look at some of our past projects over the last few years, you can see that we've done a number of large things that you're familiar with, such as the MSMS renovation, the Fire Station 2, Mill Pond PFAS filter is a recent one. And if you look at all these projects, you'll see that they're in the range of $8 to about $32 million. So that's what we've typically been dealing with, and our overall bonding is a little over $100 million in Burlington right now. So that's to give you some context. If we go to the next slide on our potential future projects, there's ones that we all know about, such as the police station that's upcoming. The building committee has just voted to go to 325 Fox Hill School. We have what I'm listing as hypotheticals now, the renovation of the high school, something to do with Pine Glen perhaps. And just for reference, I put in a new Pine Glen, which was the building committee option 9A. So in looking at these, the first thing I want to point out is if you look down the column with the bonding amount, you can see that these new projects are somewhere in the $25 to $77 million range. And this is, if you look at the previous slide, it's about 3 times as large as the projects we were doing just a few years ago, which is why I'm going to talk about some different strategies for funding these than what we're used to. In the past, our projects such as the second fire station at $8.5 million, the debt service on that is fit into our budget. We didn't have to do anything special. So that was sort of our normal mode of business, is if we didn't do too many huge projects all at once, it fit into the budget and everything worked out nicely. But what we're seeing here, if you take a look at the bottom of the page, you'll see what is our typical debt service per year. So in FY24, our current fiscal year, our debt service is $8.2 million. And that's for everything. If we look at the Fox Hill 325, you see the debt service for that alone would be $5.5 million. So it's over half of our current debt service in terms of an increase of where we're at. If you put together the police station, which is very likely to be done at the same time or in the same time frame, those two together are adding up to $8.7 million. So the two projects that we plan, hopefully, to do in a relatively short term would more than double our debt service from where we are now. Now, it's okay that our debt service is going up because historically it's been probably on the low side because in the big scheme of things, Burlington has probably fallen behind in terms of investing in infrastructure. But the point is, in terms of magnitude, this is taking us to a whole nother level of indebtedness that we need to be aware of. Now, if you look at the last column, which is the tax impact on the median household. In other words, half the households pay more, half pay less. If we look at the Fox Hill 325 project, for instance, that's an extra $255 of tax, which is about 3.9% of what the median tax bill is right now. So if we add that with the police station again, just for example, those two add up to about 6.2% of the current tax bill. So the question is how significant is that? So to put that in context, if we look at the second to last line, you'll see the typical increase that we've had over the last 3 years or so in terms of the tax bill for a household is 4.3%. So raising taxes by 3.9% just for the Fox Hill 325 school is almost as large of an increase as people are used to getting normally for everything else. So again, we're talking about an increase that is roughly double of what people are used to in 1 year. Now, we'll attempt to smooth this out because it doesn't need to all be bonded in the exact same year. The construction takes place over a couple years. But the point is the aggregate increase will be that extra 3.9%. So the point of this is just to show that the tax increase due to the extra indebtedness of these projects, and the Fox Hill in particular, since we're talking about that, are going to be pretty noticeable. So it's something that we need to prepare the town for and, quite frankly, have a good marketing campaign for. This has to be justified. It's not something that will easily slip in there. If we go to the next slide, so I'm going to talk a bit about Proposition 2.5 before I get back to the topic here, because this really, having a little primer on this is helpful in terms of understanding what our options are and what we can do. So Proposition 2.5 was enacted back in 1980 with the point being to essentially limit tax growth. And if there is more tax growth, at least make sure that the population or citizens are involved in that decision. There's a lot of parts to Proposition 2.5, so I'm going to try to focus on the ones that really matter to us. The first one is a levy ceiling, which is the absolute limit of what the tax levy can be, and that's 2.5% of total property values. In general, that has not been an issue for Burlington because it's significantly higher than what the levy limit is. So what's the levy limit is basically how much the town can levy or tax its citizens plus businesses. So how is that determined? And it'll be an exciting graphic in the next slide. But the general idea is you take the levy limit for the current year, add an extra 2.5% to it, add in taxes for any new growth, such as a whole new building goes up, and then add in any overrides that may have been passed, and we'll talk about overrides in a moment. So one interesting aspect of this is you'll see that inflation is not in this equation anywhere. And as you may be aware, there's been a fair number of years where inflation has been over 2.5%. So in real terms, this could actually mean that the amount the town can levy goes down in terms of constant dollars, which is why a fair number of towns have gotten into a bind over 2.5, and why we'll talk about overrides in a moment. The last line I'll just put in here is the concept of an excess levy capacity, or I'll refer to as unused levy capacity for clarity. But this is basically, there's the levy limit. The Proposition 2.5 equation tells us how much can we tax, and then there's the actual levy that the town uses. So historically, Burlington is not taxed all the way up to the levy limit, and we in fact have unused levy capacity, and most recently that's been about $13 million, which is a fairly healthy amount, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in a moment. If we go to the next slide, this is the only picture, you can see that this is just showing how that levy limit is determined. So there's the limit base, which is the previous year's levy limit. So again, it's the previous year's levy limit, not its actual levy. You add on top of that the 2.5% growth. You add on top of that any overrides. And then on top of that, you can actually go above the levy limit if you have a debt exclusion or a capital outlay exclusion. And we'll talk about both of those in just a moment. So if we go to the next slide, we'll talk about what's an override. So an override is a permanent increase to the levy limit. So it's a way of, it's one of the two mechanisms whereby the town can tax more than what Proposition 2.5 would have otherwise allowed. The mechanism for causing this to have an override is that 2/3 of the select board has to agree to put it on the ballot, so that'd be 4 out of 5 in our case. And then the town has to pass it with a majority of citizens voting. So this is something that Burlington has never done, but it's a fairly common thing in that about 86% of Massachusetts communities have had an override vote. So while it may seem very unusual to us, because it is, it's not unusual in terms of what's done in Massachusetts. So if we go to the next slide, we'll talk about the second mechanism that's available to the town to have a larger tax levy than 2.5 would otherwise allow. So whereas an override is something that is a permanent increase that carries forward year to year, an exclusion is tied to a specific project. So if we talk about in the context of a school, for instance, if an override, was passed for a school project, then the town would be able to increase its levy by the amount of the debt service associated with that project for the life of the project. So typically we bond things for about 25 years in Burlington. So that would mean for that full 25 years, if it's an extra $1 million of expenses associated with that, then the levy could be increased by that $1 million for those 25 years. So we could essentially do all the rough intent is we could do our operations budget unaffected by this added expense. It doesn't eat into our levy limit. The mechanism for this is similar in that 2/3 of the select board needs to put it on the ballot for citizens to vote on it, where it has to pass by a majority vote. And then, as with all other borrowing, 2/3 of town meeting would need to approve it. Even without a debt exclusion, 2/3 of a town meeting vote would be required to allow that borrowing. Strategically, there's no requirement as to the order that these votes occur, so we can decide which one is most appropriate. Now, in general, if you have multiple projects that may require an exclusion, Proposition 2.5 allows those to be aggregated on the ballot, so you could just have one question that says, we want to do 5 projects, it all adds up to this, what do you think? MSBA has special additional rules which say, no, you can't do that. So in particular, in our case, the police station and the school, if they happen to come up in the same election, would be required to be separate questions. So we would not be allowed to aggregate that. So Burlington has had 2 votes on debt exclusions in the past. Unfortunately, they haven't gone well for us. In '94, one narrowly failed, and that was for some school projects. And 2003, another one less narrowly failed. And those are the only times we've done it. Now, I'll point out, even though these debt exclusions failed, it doesn't mean that we can't do the project. It just means that we don't get to increase our levy by the debt service associated with these things. So to make it more concrete, if we had a Fox Hill debt exclusion, if it passed, that's great, and I'll explain why I think that's great. And if it fails, it doesn't mean we can't do the Fox Hill project anyway. It just means it will eat into that unused levy capacity. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in a moment. So if we go to the next slide, this is probably my densest slide. I promise not to read it all. What are some of the figures we have for FY23, our fiscal year just closed a little bit ago? The levy limit was 148 million. The actual levy that we imposed was 134 million, which gives the difference between those an unused levy capacity of 13.2 million. So what does it mean to have unused levy capacity? It means that if town meeting and the select board basically decide we're going to raise taxes another $13 million this year because we got a lot of great things we want to do for the town, and then that can be done without further approval. Without further approval from going to the town. There would not need to be a town-wide vote on that because that's within the levy limit. So having that unused levy capacity is very important in that it gives us a nice buffer for what the levy can be. So that's great. Is there a problem here because it's so large? And the answer is not immediately. But if we extrapolate from where we are and look at how the levy is growing and how our levy limit is growing, we see something interesting. So if you put in some numbers for the 2.5% automatic increase on the levy limit by Prop 2.5, new growth, we can conservatively estimate at 1.5 million, about another %. And there are other models. Ultimately, we come up with similar answers, though. That means the levy limit increases about 3.5% a year, maybe a little more. Our levy growth, historically in the last few years, has been 4.8% on average. So you may notice that 4.8 is larger than the 3.5, and you're right. If we assume no new projects on that future project list are being done, then and just sort of do our normal amount of spending, so to speak, we see that in about 6 years, or FY30, the excess levy capacity has dwindled down to 0, and we'll need to do a Proposition 2.5 override just to pass the operating budget, never mind doing large projects. This is a position that the finance team really doesn't like to be in, because I think the last thing we want to have to do is go to a town-wide vote just to get our budget passed, never mind doing large capital projects. So why does the budget grow that much? Well, you guys have something to do with it. But in general, our operating budgets have been growing about 3.5% plus or minus each year. The accommodated budget has been growing anywhere from 5.25% to 9% a year. A large fraction of that is salary expenses, as you know, for schools in particular. And so what does that mean? If we look at, I'm not going to read that chart on the right, it's just there for backup, but the takeaways from that are twofold. One is about 80% of our revenues come from tax levy. The rest is from the state and local receipts and so on, but the levy is the only one that the town can really turn the knob on. So if we need more revenue, we basically need to increase the levy. Where are the expenses going? About 52% of it is education-related expenses. About 35% is operating expenses for education, and the rest are education-associated expenses that you have various levels of control over in the short and long term. But the point of that is twofold. One is education is a large fraction of our expenses, and we'll be seeing increased pressure on expenses just because of this narrowing unused levy capacity. And a debt exclusion now can delay overrides later, because anything that we get into a debt exclusion means that our levy that we can use for normal operating expenses is still available, as opposed to being used up by paying off debt service. So that's really the point there. So if we go to the next slide, we'll bring it home with a few observations here. The first one is what we started with, which is the new projects are significantly, meaning about 3 times, more expensive than past projects. And that's largely due to building costs going up dramatically, which we've seen, in particular with the school projects, but with our other projects also. So therefore, the debt service of a single new project is a large fraction of the excess levy capacity, which means that while past projects may not have eaten into our levy capacity too much, any of these new projects will be significant if there is not an exclusion. And then, as we just saw, the reason we don't want to eat into that unused capacity, and again, I'm just going to briefly go back myself here. If we look at, if we were to take the police station and the Fox Hill 325 with a debt service of 8.7, that would come right off of that 13.2 unused capacity. So those 2 projects alone would use up well over half of our unused levy capacity, which means that if we did not have an exclusion, that instead of our unused levy capacity being used up in 6 years, it would be less than 3 years. So that's the concern. So it's not that financially we must do an exclusion. It's that financially it's a really good idea, because we don't want to be getting into needing an override again for operating budget. And then the thing I'll also point out is really that last point, and I want to emphasize, I wrote the word hypothetical on these. The high school potential renovation, I put a number of 40 million there. I know I've heard it could very quickly get to 80, and probably even more. The point is these things all scale, and the same thing with Pine Glen. I threw a number in there, say, if we happen to do a renovation at 25, this is what that means. But really the point is these things all scale. If you double the number, it's doubling the debt service, it's doubling the tax impact. It's very easy math. So you can scale it to whatever number you like there. But the point is that if we look at the numbers on this chart, if, for example, a future building committee decided we needed to do a whole new Pine Glen at 92 million, that would be the largest number on all the projects that are listed here totally. And same thing with the high school renovation. If we used the $80 million number that someone mentioned, that would be more than the Fox Hill 325 school. So you can scale the numbers here and see what they imply, but the point is having the potentially two largest numbers be question marks right now does make for a challenging projection situation. So I'll say from a going forward point of view, that brings us to the final slide here on the various questions that are raised. I'll mention the last point first, which is project scheduling ends up being pretty key on these. Again, the typical bonding is 25 years on these. So, if things are spread out over a course of 10 years, for example, it means that the overlapping debt service is only on half the project instead of the full time. It also means the tax increase for any given year is now spread out over time. So one key thing will be having these things spread out by a number of years. So the big questions we all need to answer together are debt exclusion or not, and I think to our mutual consternation, I think the answer is it's a really good idea because it does give us flexibility so that as sad as you may be about hearing that, you'll be even sadder saying you need to do a Proposition 2.5 override to get your school budget passed. It's all a matter of what we want to be sad about. Probably the really big unknown is what level of exclusion or override will Burlington pass. We've seen, the last time we tried doing exclusion was 20 years ago. So the population has changed. I think we've seen with recent ballot measures that there's a fairly large contingent of no new taxes in Burlington. So that really goes to that point that we really need a concerted and consistent campaign if we want to be doing these projects. It's not something that will easily pass by any means. This obviously directly relates to what kind of tax increase residents and businesses will accept. And the talk has been very focused on a median household because that's something we all understand, and the homeowners and other citizens are the ones that are voting. So we tend to focus on that, but we should be aware that that commercial levy is about 62% of the total levy. So commercial is paying a little less than twice of what the residential sector is paying. And while businesses don't vote directly, they can vote with their feet, obviously, and obviously factors into their decision of coming to Burlington. So we want to be cognizant of that and think about what businesses can bear. And obviously, while businesses don't have children, businesses have schools, have employees that have children, and that's good schools are one of the things that obviously attract people to live in a place and work in a place. So it does benefit everyone, whether it's directly or indirectly. As mentioned, resolving, I know there's a BHS building committee. Getting a cost on that will be key, or at least some options, and a projected time frame. Spreading that out over time would be excellent. With a building as large as BHS, one could easily imagine that it could be a multi-year project where we do a fifth of it over each of 5 years. Could be a very viable approach, and would, from a bonding and tax impact point of view, be very beneficial. And then again, with Pine Glen, do we continue just doing maintenance as we're doing now for quite some time? Do we need a significant renovation? Do we demand a totally new school? Obviously each of those is an increasing cost thing. So from a cost point of view, we'd obviously like to move towards the lighter ones there. So that's a pretty broad overview of where things are at. So I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you, Mr. Eiler. Lots of people have been asking questions about this, and I think you did a nice job giving us some background about Prop 2.5 and what that means. And I do know Ms. Massardo has her hand raised, so would you like to ask a question or make a comment?
Sure. I just wanted to say, I think you touched on it, but I think on it was either the first or the second slide. I think if we're presenting these, I think we need to use more accurate figures. The high school, I believe, we're looking at $180 million at a bare absolute minimum, nowhere near 40. And then the quote we got on Fox Hill for code repair only was also $60 million. So I don't think we're going to renovate Pine Glen for anything less than that. So I just think if we're putting this out there, I just really want the numbers to be as close to accurate as possible.
Yeah, and that's fine. And to be honest with you, I
Purposely made them incorrect because I didn't want to imply that these were based on anything other than a total hypothetical example. What I will emphasize again, if you look at which is why I put question marks on them, by the way. If you look at the first line of potential projects, where it has example for scaling, it truly is as straightforward as that. For every $10 million, it's another $0.7 million in debt service. It's another 0.5% on tax increases or tax impact. So a $100 million project, just that would be 10 times as large. It would be $7 million of debt service. It would be a 5.1% tax impact. So everyone can mentally put in whatever numbers they like, and again compare those to our current situation for scaling of a typical 4.3% tax increase and our current $8.2 million debt service. So everything wants to be compared to those, so you get a sense of the scale as to how likely it is that these things will be supportable or not.
Thank you. Does anyone else have a comment? Mr. Brooks? Question?
Yeah, so Mr. Eiler, the first slide again, just a question on that. When you put the pacing of the projects in there with the year's question mark, is that, later on in your presentation, you said, hey, the project pacing is going to drive this. Is that a project pacing you feel the town could make this work, or is this just numbers to put in there for the years these schools, or the earliest those schools could be addressed? I'm just trying to understand the graphic a little better.
I think I understand that.
I heard him. Let me try to repeat. He's referencing on the slide with potential projects, there's a column for funding fiscal year. And for the 3 at the end, you have a question mark. And he's asking, are those things that you think are realistic that we could support, or is that just numbers?
Got it. Okay.
Right? Is that correct, Mr. Brooks?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Thanks for that interpretation. So the dates I put in there are strictly the earliest that I thought those things could happen from, just procedurally. From a financial point of view, I think we would definitely want them to be later. So again, just based on when the building committee was formed, the BHS renovation is at least a year behind where Fox Hill was. And given that we haven't formed a building committee for Pine Glen yet, I'm assuming that's at least 3 years behind that. From a financial point of view, again, it really depends on the scale here. If the BHS renovation is really $180 million, as I think Ms. Massardo said, there's something that we would not want to do immediately in 2027 and absolutely not fit in any kind of financial model that the town would ever support. If just my personal opinion. But if it's, and that, is going to suck all the oxygen out of the air, in that, you can, if you want to spend $180 million, in the short term on BHS, then that would suggest that any kind of Pine Glen project, again, from my point of view, would need to be substantially delayed because that's going to use up such a huge amount. Again, our current indebtedness in the town, while low, is a little over 100 million. So throwing an extra 180 on that is almost tripling the indebtedness, which is pretty major. So the scaling is pretty key here to think about. Again, would something like a large renovation, I think we'd really want to think about how could we do that in phases as an example.
Is there a follow-up, Mr. Brooks?
Model you presented assumes we will get a debt exclusion, correct?
Your sound was going in and out. If you could maybe speak closer to the microphone.
Yeah, sorry. The model you presented assumes that the debt exclusion does pass.
It assumes the debt exclusion passes.
The model assumed the debt exclusion passed.
The soonest, are you saying? Is it the soonest?
No, just that the debt exclusion passes in the model he presented.
Does the debt exclusion pass in the modeling presented?
Thank you. Okay. I guess it depends what modeling you're talking about. In the modeling of when does the operating budget increase alone eat up the unused levy capacity, that assumes that we didn't do any of these projects. In terms of, so that's probably the most significant modeling. In terms of the impact of, on the debt service and so on, that's really orthogonal to whether we do an exclusion or not. That's just the cost of what it is. So I'm not sure if that's answering your question or not.
Okay. Ms. Massardo, Ms. Monaco? Sit right here.
Yeah, I have a few questions.
Okay.
So I think the 180 million that Melissa referenced for the high school is probably some kind of renovation that would have that price tag. Because if you look at the new high schools that are being built, they're 400 million, 350, 380. So if we were to build a new high school, that would be really big, and I'm pretty sure it would have to be done with a debt exclusion. On the other hand, if, as you say, we did it in sections, which totally remains to be seen, because we haven't even hired an OPM yet.
Ms. Monaco, can you speak into the mic?
Yeah, I thought I was, sorry. So a new high school would be a lot of money. It might be worth it, but it would be a lot of money. And if we end up doing sections, as you said, like a new science wing somewhere, and then a new this or that or whatever, I can see what you're suggesting is that possibly it would be done over quite a few years, actually. And if Pine Glen is renovated, I would think that it could fit in somewhere. I'm not asking you, I'm just saying what my thought is, that you wouldn't have to wait until you had completed the high school. You'd fit Pine Glen in much sooner. But anyway, what I did want to bring up is you mentioned that all these towns have done overrides and debt exclusions. And that's true. I mean, over 300, right? And so it seems to me that Proposition 2.5 has really caused some issues because it stayed at 2.5. And is there any discussion at the state level? I mean, you probably don't know the answer to this, but raising that number so that it doesn't stay at 2.5, maybe it goes to 3 or 3.5.
So, yeah, I mean, you're exactly right. Because it's not inflation adjusted, I think that's where it's eventually caught up to every town, and even Burlington is looking at it catching up to us, and we've had a pretty large unused capacity. I'm not aware of any attempt to change that number. I think it's been at 2.5 since 1980.
It has.
Yeah, so I think they've tweaked it a little bit, the general rules, but I don't know if that number's being looked at being increased, but I'm not aware of that. So
I tried to find it, and I did see mention of discussions, but nothing concrete. So I just wanted to make that point. And then I had a couple of other points. For a long time, I've heard, like the debt exclusions we did in the past, I've heard things like, well, we have to do a debt exclusion. I mean, they failed, and we survived anyway, but we have to do a debt exclusion because we're going to run into the levy limit. And to that point, we still haven't run into the levy limit, and it's still a few years off. And so I know you mentioned new growth at 1.5 million. That sounds low to me. And there's also free cash, which seems to be getting more and more each year. I mean, it used to be like 6 or 8, and now it's 20-something. So I'm asking you if you have any reasons you can give me why your prediction of when we hit the levy limit might be wrong and it might take longer.
Sure, I can absolutely argue against myself. You're absolutely right. The 1.5 million is something of new growth, is something that the town administration has been using in their fairly conservative financial modeling, and we like them to be conservative as opposed to those freewheeling Orange County people that went bankrupt. So if we look at the last few years, the average growth has been more on the order of 2.5 million. So it's absolutely been higher than that typically. So what that says is that if you were to use the $2.5 million, which I also modeled, if you keep the same growth of 4.8%, it absolutely extends it out a few years. There's no doubt about that. The other thing that could happen is we could go with smaller operating budget increases, obviously, and I know you don't want to hear that. But we only have a couple knobs here. You can turn the expense knob, or you can turn the revenue knob, and you can turn the new growth knob. So we talked about new growth. We could absolutely have more of that. We could have other miracles of revenue increases with local receipts could go up. The hotel business could skyrocket. But again, that's only about 10% of our budget. We could get more state aid, which historically we haven't seen dramatic changes in. So there are a few things that could happen that absolutely push that date out. And in the end, it's as much a political decision as it is a financial one. We may decide collectively that it's easier to go to the town and say, look, our unused capacity is running out. If the town would like to see the same type of services that it has now, wants to see the same kind of things going on in the schools that is going on now, it may be easier to go for a 2.5 override and get the limit increased for that way. And as you say, we could just, on the two things immediately on our plate, we could say, let's just do a police station and the Fox Hill 325, use up, somewhere between, 50% or 2/3 of the unused capacity in 3 years. We'll, if things don't work out, we'll deal with an override. If we've been overly conservative again and it ends up not being an issue in 3 years, and that's absolutely possible, then things are great. We could also take the approach of saying there's no harm in trying to do a debt exclusion. If it fails, then we're back to what we just talked about. If it passes, we will have a higher levy that we're allowed to have, and it gives us more headroom. So So we should be aware, much like if the other two debt exclusion votes failed, it doesn't mean that we can't do the project. It doesn't mean that, so the town may be saying we don't like spending more money, but ultimately it does not because we do have unused capacity, it does not preclude us from doing these projects. So there's really two separate discussions here. Is what do we think is a good idea to do politically / financially in terms of the levy and debt exclusions to help increase that limit, and how much do we want to let that influence whether we do the project or not. So again, it's very much within our means to do these projects now, regardless of debt exclusion. It's a planning for the future thing and giving us more headroom. Sort of like increasing the credit limit on our credit card. Even if we haven't spent it all now, we may see that we want to buy a new car a few years from now, and it's good to have that excess credit. It's the same thing here. So sort of a long-winded answer to your question.
Do you have other questions? Okay. Do either of you have more questions or comments? No. I wanted to ask you, actually, I don't know who's the right person to ask. The BHS project cost, we have not yet hired an OPM, but we are hoping to do it, and we actually could do it faster than the MSBA process because we're not using the MSBA. So making assumptions about how long it will take are also assumptions. So we don't know. But I wanted to know realistically, in terms of the process that will start with an OPM and then getting a designer, do we think that we might have some of these rough numbers, looking at you, Dr. Conti, in case you know, by next September or in another year? Sorry. That was a question for you.
That was a
Dr.
question,
Conti.
yes.
Sorry, before I
Again, I think we need to hire the OPM first and ask them, but again, I'm assuming we could get at least some better numbers than we have now, which are sort of absent.
Right.
I'm hoping we could get those sort of by the end of the summer and the fall. I mean, I hope we get something. So, you know, different versions, different options. I'm sure they'll go through lots of options like we just went through with Fox Hill.
Right. Okay, thank you. I also wanted to, I had the same reaction that Ms. Massardo did about, using 40 million as our placeholder for the high school project. And as far as my understanding is that when we got the HVAC feasibility study done, so that was just to redo the HVAC and then do the triggers that meant that we would then get sprinklers and we would get ADA accessibility into the building. That was already $85 million. So I'm not quite sure, $180 million, and then it's going to be a few years down the road, and then we have inflation. So that's a question for me. I also have been fantasizing what you and other people have described about being able to do such a large project like the high school in phases. And, part of me just sort of wants to look at a little bit of it and say this would work. But if we were to, when we get to that point, and the high school building committee is going to have to talk about this, but if we expand, like if we do one wing 1 year and 2 years later do another wing, it means that the high school is going to be a construction site for 10 years instead of for 4 years. So, those are all the things that we're going to have to be looking at as we go forward with that building project description. I also wanted to just add to your observation about, it's obvious the new projects are significantly more expensive than our past projects. And you did comment this is due to the building costs that have gone up dramatically. And I think that we all know in the last 3 to 5 years, building costs, it's partly inflation, it's partly the construction industry, it's partly supply chain, but we built the memorial school 12 years ago for under $30 million. And the Fox Hill project that we're now looking at, which is a little bit larger in square footage, but not that much, is going to be around $80 million. And that's just the town part. So I think that we do need to be bold about saying how are we going to provide the infrastructure that we need in our town and in the schools. I think you're right that it's something that's been a bit overdue, and yet now here we are with now here we are, and we've got 2 or 3 school building projects plus the police station, and so there are people who don't want nobody wants their taxes raised. Right, but I do hope that we can do what you've mentioned several times, which is that we can find, the most practical ways and try not to overburden people to the extent that we can, but also to find ways to have the community support new schools, a new police department, and those things. I just wanted to check. Ms. Massardo's got her hand up, so I'm going to let her speak, and I just want to check if I had another comment or question.
I just wanted to answer your question. We hired the designer around Christmas time on Fox Hill, and then by June is when we started to see dollar figures. So I think once the designer's on board, 6 months is a reasonable timeline. So I agree with Dr. Conti, sometime in the summer, if not sooner. Because a designer, if we get an OPM by the end of October, we should have a designer by November. So by the end of the school year, I would imagine we'd have dollar figures for BHS. And the other thing that's worth noting, again, I think we need to be accurate with all these costs, because like Martha said, I haven't read any news articles about districts being pleasantly surprised with the price of their buildings. We eliminated both renovation options from Fox Hill and Pine Glen because they were actually more expensive than new options. So I think we keep throwing around renovation, and I'm hoping that both Pine Glen and VHS can be simply renovated. But it's worth noting in the one project where we've completed the study, that renovation is not necessarily anymore the cost savings that I think maybe it was once upon a time. I just wanted to share that.
Thank you.
The other comment the other comment I want to make, in addition to supporting what Dr. Conti said, which is new high schools are going at 300 million and above. And I don't want to say it because it's a scary number, but it's reality. And on the other hand, these towns that are around us have said, okay, we're going to bite the bullet. We need a new high school, and so we're going to support them. And people's taxes have gone up, but they've had support in the communities for these school building projects. So I do hope that we have support in our community for school building projects. And then the last thing you mentioned also about a lot of this is a political decision. I wish it were purely an educational decision or even purely a financial decision, but it's also a political decision. And a lot of what we are talking about tonight, even the conversation, is speculation. We don't know for sure all of the costs. We don't know for sure what the town will support. We don't know for sure whether town meeting will support it. And those things are all speculation. And I hope that the town can get together, and in particular as a school committee member behind the school projects. But those are all speculations. And I think you've given us a lot more information. I want to thank you, because a number of things that we can give people information about, I think you've done tonight in a really clear way. Is this something that we would post on the website so if people want access to it? Because obviously I'm sitting here with my printout, and it's hard for other people maybe to follow, but it would be available. Dr. Conti?
Sure, it's a public document at this point, so I would post it.
Okay.
Absolutely.
All right. So,
May I ask a couple questions of
absolutely,
Mr. Eiler?
please do.
Mr. No, Mr. Eiler, thank you. I think the timing of this is important for several reasons. Obviously, the cost, but I know of several communities where the initial projects were approved and voted on and estimated, and then when the projects went out to bid, they came back so much higher that then they had to go back to the community, or the original debt exclusion or the original override wasn't sufficient. And if you think it's difficult to pass an override or an exclusion once, having to do it sort of twice in a row makes it almost impossible, and they've had to drop the project. So it also depends on the volatility of the bidding environment. But I do think that causes lots of the contractors that we're working with to be incredibly conservative, because no one wants to estimate a project and then go out to bid and have that estimate be too low. So I just think there's volatility on not only the revenue side of this, but on even what the projects are going to cost or the estimated cost.
I completely agree, and obviously there's a lot of gamesmanship in this, and that magically the bids probably correlate quite well with the amount that the town has budgeted oftentimes on projects, because it is all public information. So that's something that we're stuck with in the public bidding environment, obviously. I think having the unused levy capacity is something that can help us with that. If we did do a debt exclusion and it ended up being a little bit more, instead of having to go for another one, we could say, okay, the increase isn't too bad. That could eat into our unused capacity. So hopefully, unless things go double from what we anticipate, having that unused capacity will give us a little leeway if we're not right on the money.
Yeah, I don't think projects have doubled, but boy, to see a $50, $75, $100 million increase is I could give you examples of that. So it's just been a tough bidding climate. And in 2000, I think 8 or 9, when we bid Memorial, because of the economic climate then, the bids came in $6 million under the estimated cost. We're so far removed from that now that it would be difficult. My argument to the committee is always about operational costs, because as brand new and well-designed as a school can be, or as challenging as an older design can be, the most important factor in a child's learning is the quality of the educators who are in front of that child. So in the grand scheme of a 40 or 50 life span of a building, we will spend many more millions of dollars on salary for the professionals who are in front of students. So it's a relative number from my perspective, and it's almost a sacred number in this argument, in this process. So we do have, for instance, our contracts are due. So again, I know necessarily we're not talking about impacting the levy limit for fiscal '25, but we will have some significant impact on the levy limit there, and we have a new transportation contract that's coming up. So if the committee wants to keep the same parameters around transportation, then there have been the same increases that have hit the construction industry have also impacted transportation. So again, Mr. Eiler, I appreciate the dials that you're sort of saying we have limited numbers to turn, but I do think the operational parts of this in our programming are really what separate us, in this. And I would hate to see long-term debt surpass or influence the amount that we have to spend on the people who are here, who I feel are the most valuable assets that we have. And that's why the debt exclusion, although the history in Burlington is not there, I do think people here do value their programs and do value the opportunities that, that the staff provide the children here. So I think that would be the argument to make, is the more important asset from my perspective are the people here.
And I completely agree with you, and I think I'm a huge education fan.
Yeah.
Really, the point of was not to alarm people with that, although I know it can be. The point of that is to say, look, here's the history of where we've been with debt exclusions. Here's where things are headed in terms of operational budgets eating into things. We need to work hard to come up with a clear set of reasons why this makes sense, so that people will agree to it. And that's really probably the most important point. Is let's start thinking about what that marketing effort will be, and to show why it is a good investment, because I completely agree with your points.
Okay, Ms. Monaco?
I just want to make a point about posting this on the website. I think we're going to confuse people because of the numbers. The 40 million for the high school. I mean, people.
So I'll admit I thought about this. It could, and I did put question marks everywhere with the word hypothetical. I understand people ignore all that. I was trying to make it be relevant. You could simplify that and call it hypothetical project 1, hypothetical project 2. We could eliminate those lines altogether. Either way is perfectly fine. From my point of view, it was really just to provide something that you could scale. If you think it's going to be 4 times this, multiply it by 4, but I agree it could be confusing from a public point of view if they haven't heard this discussion.
Right. I think if you just put this presentation on the website, it's going to cause mass confusion.
Yes, my intent with providing a pile of data here was to give backup so that as things came up, all the data would be in front of people. But I agree, looking at the data without context could be very misleading. I'll leave it up to you guys
Well,
how
do you
you
have a
want to
rec-
deal with that.
Do you have a recommendation, Mrs. Monaco?
No.
Okay.
I don't.
Well, you just suggested, Mr. Eiler, that we could eliminate those 2 lines.
Sure.
I think it is a question, just those 2 lines, which are the hypotheticals. If you're willing to.
Yeah,
do
I'd be,
that,
I'd be
we'll-
happy to take those off. They're strictly hypothetical and not meant to be representative of any actual cost estimate.
Is that something that we can do before the final version goes to the
I
webmaster?
could do that tomorrow.
Okay, are you comfortable with that, Dr. Conti? Yes, and Mr. Brooks?
Yeah, just a question, Madam Chair. Do we have to, by open meeting law, present the presentation as submitted to the committee? Are we allowed to change that? I just want to make sure we're not breaking any rules here.
I believe from an open meeting law point of view, you may need to attach the original presentation to your minutes. There's nothing
About what you must post on your website, or even that you must post it on your website. So what you put on your website can be completely independent of what was presented here.
That sounds like a good strategy, okay? So will, Mr. Eiler, if you and Dr. Conti can take care of that, that would be great. Is there any further discussion on this topic? Okay. All right, is there any other updates on the Fox Hill Building Committee? I can update that the ANRAD site visit was today, and they were making sure that the delineation of wetlands was correct, and it looked to me like that we were in good shape with that. Is there any other updates, Mr. Cuna? Okay. The next Fox Hill Building Committee meeting is Monday,
23rd.
October 23rd, I believe, right? Yep, okay.
And then I'll be
Dr. Conti?
attending the Conservation Commission Thursday evening
Okay, thank you.
this week.
All right. The next item is the Burlington High School Building Committee update. Is there an update for that?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to actually ask Bob to, you had some people visit, some vendors visit the site, so if you want to give a summary of that.
Did they run in fear?
Actually, no. Again, through the chair, thank you, Dr. Conti. But so October 5th, we had over 10, not over, but we had 10 vendors, but more than 10 people attend an OPM tour of Burlington High School. That's probably consistent with what we've seen at the Fox Hill one. So it's no indication as to the full level of interest. or who will be submitting a proposal. But what I will comment on is that I heard numerous times throughout the walkthrough that all of the OPM had said that the building is in great condition, almost in too great condition. They're surprised and impressed with the custodial staff and the maintenance staff, the shine on the floors, the new additions that have put on, the maintenance in the boiler room, even though, again, this is a 50-plus-year-old building. But again, we did walk through, tour the full facilities, down both parts of the gym, up and down some classrooms, cafeteria, in and out of the boiler room. So again, we are presenting an interest to OPM, so hopefully in the next week we'll actually see some proposals from all of them plus more.
Dr.
Again,
Conti.
Bob, is Nicole on the call? I think I saw her name. Okay. When are the bids due?
I have to look at my notes, but I believe they're due next week.
The bids are due on Monday, October 16th.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Any further discussion about the Burlington High School Building Committee? No. The next item is the Pine Glen. Are there any comments tonight on that?
No, ma'am. It's a standing agenda item, and I have no updates on the Pine Glen.
So there's no more agenda items. We do, however, have somebody who would like to make public participation. We've already had public participation at the beginning of the meeting, but there was a lot of world events that are impacting a number of our families and children in the war going on in Israel and the Gaza Strip. And I was wondering if we could permit another public participation with a shaking of the heads of the school committee members. I would like to call on our Jamie Greitzer is here to speak a little and ask questions about that. So yes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And I appreciate everybody's time today, and I also appreciate you going off agenda to hear us. As a Burlington mom, I've always been very proud to send my kids to the Burlington schools because I've always felt very safe here. I'm lucky to live on a block where there's several Burlington police officers who live here. And I've just always felt very comfortable. After what happened on Saturday, and I don't know if everybody understands the gravity of what has happened on Saturday, but thousands of people have been just ripped from their homes and murdered in cold blood, just civilians. 40 children were found beheaded in a kibbutz today. I mean, I can't. And Israel's the size of New Jersey. So the Jewish people of Burlington have connections to the people that are suffering right now, and our children are suffering, and they know something's going on. We're developmentally appropriate language for them. They know something scary and bad's going on. And I would have suspected, an email, some kind of announcement, like we have in the past from Dr. Conti, acknowledging what had happened, standing against what had happened, and talking to us about the resources that our children can access while they're going through this really scary time in their lives. And I haven't heard anything. And even at Pine Glen, where all three of my children go right now, nothing from the principal, like nothing from the guidance counselors. I know we're a small Jewish population. I feel like that would make it easier if you weren't going to do like a big announcement for like the guidance counselor to even reach out to us, or the school psychologist, some kind of outreach. So we felt comfortable sending our kids to school, because as close as Cambridge, there were thousands of people who applauded what Hamas did to not only my family, but several Burlington families. So yeah, I guess my question is, what is the district going to do to make our children feel safe again?
Can you respond, Dr.
I can, and Ms. Greitzer, first by apologizing for not putting something out. I think our first response was to actually focus on safety first, and we have had members of the community reach out to us and offer to provide resources for students who were troubled. So I do think I am late on getting something out in terms of resources to families. I'll work on that and try to get that out as soon as possible. But again, our initial response was to talk about what our safety protocols would be. And you mentioned that I may not have an idea of the level of tragedy and trauma that you're experiencing, and that may be the case. So I apologize for that.
I'm also, it's just hard to even know what to say and how to say it, but the important thing is to make sure that our children feel safe. And perhaps your suggestions about in each school, maybe the counselors could reach out to the Jewish students to make sure they're feeling safe, and to make the families aware of the resources that you have. I know the rabbi in Burlington, Rabbi Abramson, has offered as well. And how do we reach a small segment of our population? But it's very important that all of our students feel safe. So thank you for raising the issue. Okay. Any further comments? No. Yeah, it is heartbreaking. So if there's no other business before this body, sad note to end on, but hopefully we will see better days in the future. I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Ms. Monaco has made the motion.
Second.
Mr. Brooks has seconded it. Ms. Monaco? Mr. Brooks?
Aye.
The chair votes aye, and that's 3-0-0. Thank you.